the first thing is thank you for being here for this interview for La Voce di New York. And we'll start this roundtable to talk about the documentary you made, Tomato Soup in Skid Row. And I'm here with Alexo Wandael, writer and director, Daniela Ovi, editor and producer, and Pete White, producer and member of LACAN, Los Angeles Community Action Network. And just an introduction for the audience. This film approaches homeless people who live in Skid Row. That's a district in downtown LA. Now we'll explain what this is about, but if we want to introduce it, we can say that Skid Row is kind of open air refugee camp. So let's start from the casting process. And let's talk about your approach to people's stories from Skid Row community, the process of selection and editing, and how was it like dealing with fears, violence, and hope while you were making this excellent documentary?
I can start by saying that I wanted to thank you for having us here and jump in. The casting and this process was basically held by Pete and Monique of LACAN, and they were the one that they were helping me heavily with meeting a lot of people and explain the idea of the project that we had. And it took several weeks, if not months, before we managed to get to the people that they were comfortable and they wanted to tell the story. Because it's difficult. It's hard to be in front of the camera and tell your own story. So so the process was made basically in the heart of Skid Row and in the LACAN quarters, basically.
And so at LACAN, we believe that art has no address. Where we're situated, we're in downtown Los Angeles. And so we have MoCA, we have Disney Hall, we have all of these great jewels of culture, but oftentimes forgotten is the culture that exists in poor communities, right? The fact that our walls become canvases for our expression, right? Our voices become sort of instruments for agency and resilience, right? Through song and through poetry. And so we've always held close to our hearts that we would, we would create our own culture, but we would also welcome opportunities, such as this documentary, that would sort of tell the untold stories, right? Many of the stories that are told about our communities or communities like ours are tales of defeated people, of hopeless people, of people who come from nowhere, right? Stripped of agency, right? Stripped of the resilience that they have. And we know that going in, right? That it becomes important to tell a counter narrative. But I think, and this is more to your question, I think more importantly than the final product is the process. That in the process, there is room for all voices. In the process, there is patience, right? In the process, there's exchange, there's negotiation, right? Creating or leading a process that at the end of the day, the film, in this case, is great, but even greater than that is the establishment of relationships, right? And so in working with Alexo and his team, it was all of that, right? There have been so many, even last night, I get requests on a daily, filmmakers, I want to make a film about, I want to make a film about LACAN. And when can I bring the camera? One, you can't, particularly if you're starting from there. And two, it becomes important to respect this community in the same way that you would respect other communities, right? And so with this film, it was all of that, right? And let me just say, Alexo talks about the time period before the shooting. It's important, you know, we all know, you know, time is money. There's budgets. We're trying to figure things out. But if you set that aside for a second, and you let the real folks shine through, the depth of that film, or the depth of that poetry, the depth of that song is going to be so deep that no one can ignore it. And so, yeah, that's what I would say about the process.
Yeah, so like they both said, it all stems from the desire to keep the stories as true as possible, and to let the people speak for themselves, because they never get to speak. Like, I've been in LA for 16 years and I spend a lot of time in the car, right? And over the years, they just become part of the, you know, the streets passing by, the landscape, yes. You just forget that those tents actually have every single person in each one of those tents, or walking down the street, is a different story. And you just put them all together, right? And it just becomes like this shadow, you know, this big shadow that nobody really wants to know about, because it's better to put it away because it's ugly, you know, to look at. And so when Alexa started, you know, telling me how I was going to meet the people, and just hearing the stories of, you know, who might be coming through, and see if they were interested in contributing or not. And some people, of course, didn't feel comfortable or not. Once we got to the day of shooting, and, you know, the people that decided to speak about their life, I just remember I was blown away, because for the first time I was just sitting there and just letting them speak, right? And we all come from a little, you know, privileged bubbles where we're kind of actually very homogeneous, you know, little like rich bubbles. And when I got there, these stories, it were so tragically and yet beautifully variegated. So, and you realize this could happen to anybody. This could be, again, especially in America, it just could hit anybody. And the richness of the people, and without even wanting, like, there's this theme that I think I started catching and I wanted to keep as I was editing the thing of, there's this sense of art, this sense of creativity, this sense of community, especially because all of them, every single one of them, as they were talking about how they got to Skid Row, yes, it was tragic, but then they ended up a lot of times going back to Skid Row, because guess what? There is a community, like Pete was saying earlier, people will tend to step up and help each other in tragic moments. And so for me, the most important thing, of course, you know, it's hard to talk to the camera, and we would do all of those. We would just, you know, it's train of thought. You're talking, you're just saying things, and you might repeat yourself sometimes. So what I really wanted to do with myself, and what I was trying to do, is just literally clean it up, but not touch what the people were, because it's their time, it's their moment, the spotlight is on them, and they do all the work.
You, Pete, and Monique, Monique Noel, the other producer of the documentary, you are like messengers, introducing and explaining homelessness through facts and figures. So let's go deep into Skid Row reality. Let's talk about what people don't know and what they think they know.
So I know we cover this. Whatever extensively is in a short film, we do that. I think here in this country and elsewhere. Well, I would first say, when I have friends that come from other countries, they are always blown away by the depths of poverty in the United States, particularly how it manifests in Skid Row with informal settlements for blocks and blocks. And at the time that we shot the documentary, we were already stifled with houselessness and poverty. But now it feels as if it's doubled, right? The major narrative that's been used by governments here in the United States, but we're talking right now about Los Angeles, is that houselessness is a byproduct of meritocracy, right? You just did not try hard enough. So I say, welcome, Yari. Welcome to a land of organized abandonment. Welcome to a land of informal settlements. Welcome to a land that was not chosen by the people forced to live on the streets.
Yari Gugliucci, actor, he's part of this amazing, beautiful project. Thank you for being here, Yari. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you that you joined me there. It is a very, really peculiar moment because Italy, is coming out from the pandemic and everybody's outside and it seems a mess. But we should keep watching around. There's no easy things. Is what we did with Alexo was before pandemic. All right, we started before this mess. We didn't realize what was going to happen. The shining of Alexo, that thinking about this argument about all the people that stay in Los Angeles, San Francisco, that boy, this thing like that was really, really deep for me because he didn't explain me anything, and he say, just let's talk with them, let's see what happens, and this was like kind of prelude of something that was happening because now. What I can say, I'm not exaggerating if I say that, is that we feel exactly in a situation of an establishment. I mean, we are no more sure about everything. It's going to happen in the economy, about its social status, everything. I'm not talking about the feelings or sensibility. I'm talking about that now we are like leaves in the grass on the wind. Every one of us doesn't realize anymore what's going to happen tomorrow. So this is an important movie because for me it's a movie that is a kind of a window of what's going to happen on humanity from the next 10 years. Now nobody of us will be safe anymore like before. I want to tell you, I wish I share with all of you, a part of a kind of a viral things that Andrea Bocelli, that is a very famous lyric singer, asked me to ask to William Dafoe, a lot of great stars, Stanley Tucci, that are in Italy, if they were enjoy for things, and everybody was ready to share something. I mean, I'm very in contact with Robert Downey Jr., a huge of big stars. We are all a community. We are like exactly a community. That's why this an important documentary is arriving in the right moment. So it's a very, very sensible moment to say what we really want, that the world could be changed. It's a huge word. The world change, are like things very, very huge.
I think it's a good word. I think that we don't have to be afraid of using the word change. Another important thing is that the documentary goes very specific to the stories.
It's a new way it's a new way to describe things, right?
Yes, it's very close.
Now that
Alexo was very close, actually.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a kind of Sergio Leone and also Spike Lee reminds me a lot, right?
Yes.
That's a really great job that Alexo made.
I think it was a big teamwork. It's, that is the reality, and I think what Pete was saying before Yari came in was really important because there are different rhetoric, different story.
I would just say, I think the importance, and this is just tying back this idea of change, right? And how we advance change. I think the importance of the project or any art asset is that, as you said, it could reach different audiences. That's one. But additionally, it can reach those who are tired of the politics of poverty, right? Those who are tired of just listening to the speeches, those who are tired of the intractable headbutting, right? Exactly. Creating an artistic piece makes folks sit back and just think about it. We're talking about tomato soup as a juxtaposition to houselessness and poverty. Just that in and of itself is going to make people want to lean in and say, what are they talking about? Right?
Yeah,
and they have their entire head blown off, right, by the richness. I think the other thing that becomes important, so we were talking about the narrative, right? The narrative is always about broken people and not broken systems, or systems that have been engineered to give benefit to some and to give nothing to most other people, right? It's interesting too. You talked about people being afraid of the word change. Well, if they're definitely afraid of the word change, but the other thing that they're even more afraid of is the word revolution, right? And when we talk about revolution, what we're really talking about is the radical way in which you think about things, right? And so this movie is revolutionary because it radically shifts the way you think about poor people who are forced to live in informal settlements.
You make a great work, Alexo. Great work.
Thank you.
Really, because nobody knows that you in a few minutes, few hours, few days, and I remember that you enjoy me there. You share with me this emotion, and I was, as actor, I'm used to study the script, prepare myself, and he say, Yari, use yourself, and he was really kind of neo-realism Italian, director, that one that used people from the streets. In this case, it's true, but also with a professional one that say, don't worry, no script, no lines, do what yourself. And what I saw today, because I watched for the first time, I'm tired from today, it was something that completely changed mood.
I think the major reason behind the homeless crisis in Los Angeles just boils down to three things, really. And that's housing affordability, housing availability, and poverty. People just can't afford to live in Los Angeles. It's not accessible to the people who are earning minimum wage. And when they talk about affordable housing, it's not affordable for the majority of people, just people within a certain salary or wage bracket. And that really doesn't speak to the majority of Angelenos. It absolutely doesn't include the poorest or zero income Angelenos. So when you have that existing, it just creates a massive problem for people to be able to get into the housing market and get into affordable housing. I think that the city leaders, the mayor, are aware of this problem, but there's just been little effort made to address this issue. So there's just been no real political will to really want to get to the bottom of this crisis or to do something about it.
No, I would like to ask something, and I think it's a question that is very important because it's coming out from the documentary, and is either for Pete or Monique, and this is social pandemic, because it's something already like for many years, has the connotation of even a racial, because how K.O. is really saying it, that like the first time he arrived in Skid Row, he see that all the people they have like is the same face of him, so it's a black face. So there is in Skid Row, but not only in Skid Row, there is a social that meet racial. Some of you want to talk, because I think it's a point that is made in a very subtle way in the documentary, but should be really clear.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can give my perspective. It'd be good to get a perspective from Pete, who's been in Los Angeles for most of his life. But when I first came here, I was shocked and astounded to see the amount of people that looked like me when I came to Skid Row. And so I thought, okay, this isn't an accident. This actually isn't an accident. Unfortunately, America is an extremely racist place. We've seen that. We saw that with the last administration with Trump. The legislation that was kind of pushed through to continue the segregation and oppression of certain ethnicities and groups. And so I think that, you can date it back to slavery. Ever since slavery was abolished, there were still things that were put in place to keep people in a certain situation or to keep people behind. And when I say people, I'm talking specifically about Black people. So you had the Jim Crow laws, you had segregation, you had redlining. And so all of these things were put in place so that Black people just really wouldn't make it. so that black people weren't allowed to be housed next to white people, weren't allowed to go to schools with white kids, weren't offered or the doors of opportunity for employment and for growth just wasn't available for black people. So I think that this is the ramifications. This is absolute directly linked to slavery, and nothing happening, no corrections being put in place from such a brutal and oppressive point in time. And so since then, black people have always been, a different level, on a different playing field from other folks, from white people and non-black people here in the US. And so when we talk about housing affordability and access to housing, because of redlining, because of zoning, these are the reasons why black people are most impacted by the houseless crisis, and why you see disproportionate numbers of black people that are unhoused in Los Angeles.